Hey, thanks for checking out the Good Advice Podcast, and this is round 2. So we sit down with not just my favorite guests, but your favorite guests, some of the best guests who've come on the podcast, returning for another session. And today's guest is with Stephanie Medford, the CEO of Ronald McDonald House Charities of Arkoma. It's one of our local nonprofits and certainly is a national brand. Stephanie has a phenomenal perspective on leadership and management and frankly just business. She's one of my all-time favorite people, and that's why you're going to love today's episode. Hey, stay tuned. Here comes your good advice. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Good Advice Podcast, and this is round 2. This is the time where we sit down with not just my favorite guests, but your favorite guests, and we talk about what's going on with them, what's new with them, and more importantly, what new insights do they have for you in your business. Today, we're sitting down with Stephanie Medford, who's the CEO and president of Ronald McDonald House Charities of Arkoma. She's actually the person who was the very first guest on the podcast like 2 or 3 years ago. It's pretty wild to think about. She's back today, one of my all-time favorite people, and we'll be talking about really some of the latest stuff with her, but more importantly, culture, management, the whole shebang. We'll get it all here today. Stephanie, it's great to have you here today.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited.
It's always kind of funny, like doing an intro in the same room as someone because you're like, "Don't look at me, don't look at me."
Yeah, you know? Is it awkward? Or do we make eye contact?
Yeah.
Do we? Yeah.
So we're in Stephanie's office, their main office here in Springdale, Arkansas. Stephanie, it's been a really busy last few months for you.
Yes.
And I don't know how, for the people who are listening, I don't know how involved they are with Ronald McDonald House Charities. Absolutely one of my all-time favorite nonprofits. You're one of my all-time favorite people.
Likewise.
Tell me a little bit about some of the great stuff that's happening just locally, especially in this last 30 days. You guys have had some pretty big stuff happen.
Yeah. So we opened the second standalone Ronald McDonald House in the state of Arkansas. So the third house, we have a smaller house inside a hospital in Fayetteville, Arkansas. But down in Fort Smith area, we have operated a Ronald McDonald Family Room, which is, again, kind of like a small house, a little bit different concept. Inside of a hospital. And then with the last 3 years with the growth that we've had in the community there, the hospital there, and then also just as an organization, we determined that it was time to build a new Ronald McDonald House. So we launched a $3.5 million capital campaign and started a major construction project about 3 months before COVID hit.
No big deal.
Yeah, right. On top of so many other things. You know, we had an employee that was out on maternity leave, and it ended up being an extended maternity leave because of COVID, and she was our key fundraising, or is our key fundraising person. And, you know, just all those kinds of things that get thrown in there that you can't really foresee, or you can kind of plan for some of those things to a degree, but definitely one of our core values is flexibility. And I think that will forever be one of our core values. After we went through all of that, I think it was a key learning for our team that flexibility is king for everything forever. And I think it helped us roll with the punches better. But anyway, we are almost done with the capital campaign. We have less than $300,000 of 3.5 to raise, again, through COVID. So I'm very impressed and proud of my team and the volunteers and everybody who worked hard to raise those funds while also raising, you know, needed operational funding and keeping all of our other programs running. But the house opened. It's beautiful and wonderful. It's all decorated for Christmas lights, even on the outside, which was so gracious of a donor to do, and really brought that homey feeling, which we try to achieve for families with a child in the hospital. So it's been really exciting, and we are all really happy for a little bit of a slower month.
Finally a break.
Finally, months and months later. So, yeah.
So with all the cool, amazing stuff that's happening with Ronald McDonald House, whenever you step back and you look at like everything that's happening and you think about like the momentum, especially like I've seen some of the pictures on social media of the Fort Smith house. It looks amazing. And it looks like a lot of people were involved in being part of this. You know, you as the boss, as the main person who's, you know, facilitating relationships, making these kinds of things happen. Are you at the point now where a lot of this is sort of like natural momentum, or do you have to, you know, sort of I think about like Wheel of Fortune, like the spinning wheel.
Yeah,
Like, do you have to like sometimes reach in and like refresh it, or?
Yes, I think you do, because just like in we're a nonprofit business, but we're a business. And so just like a for-profit business, your customers, in our case, we would call those donors or constituents, there are other things that they support and that they have a passion for, whether it be with their dollars or their time as volunteers. And volunteers are crucial for us because it saves us dollars, right?
Right.
As well as in-kind partners. We get $300,000 to $400,000 a year in in-kind donations, mostly like food, cleaning products, anything that you need at your household. Well, with supply chain issues, with, just lots of different things going on, a lot of that became a lot harder to come by than it had been in the past, as well as, we weren't even able to have volunteers for a certain period of time. So making sure that we were continuing to engage people and find ways that people wanted to be engaged with was really crucial for that momentum. And I would say the momentum has continued, but I think a lot of that's due to our mission. And it's a mission that's important. And in my opinion, it's not a nice thing to have a Ronald McDonald House. It's a necessity. And so I think keeping that, kind of knowing who else feels that way, like who are your tried and true donors, your tried and true volunteers, your tried and true Share a Meal, which is our meal program to provide food for families. Who are those people and what do they want? So we just launched our next 3-year strategic plan. Our board just approved that recently. So it starts January 1. And a huge piece of that is doing a lot of donor stewarding, re-looking at our donor stewardship, right? So looking at your customer engagement, maybe from, if you were a business, maybe that's the terminology that we would use.
Right.
Because I think not only did COVID impact everyone for so many reasons, but it also, I think, changed the way people want you to treat them as a donor, the ways that they want to engage with you. So again, talking about customers too, same thing.
Right.
And I think that one of the things with being flexible and adaptable is what will truly make you come out on top or not. Because we learned people don't really want to maybe go to a big 500 or 1,000 person gala anymore. They kind of enjoyed through COVID that we weren't able to do that. So how else do we retain their dollars and do we retain their engagement without maybe having a big, huge, crazy event? Now, not that we're getting rid of our events, but we did learn that we had a lot of donors who were very generous and wanted to continue to give, but we're like, I kind of like staying home though. So how can I continue to do that and do it from home?
What's the Netflix of donor events?
Yes, 100%. That's actually awesome
really
and brilliant. You should share that more.
Yeah, well, it's interesting listening to you talk about donor stewardship, which and I love how you tied it back to, and for those of you who are listening also, I want to be really clear that the reason that I don't really talk about Stephanie or Ronald McDonald House Charities explicitly as a nonprofit, and this is more specifically for you, Stephanie. The reason I don't is, and I do in other places I say, hey, this is a nonprofit. This is what it looks like. This is how it's different. You've sort of curated this business acumen, like this really incredible strategic view of your organization, and in a way, it's made your organization run like a well-oiled machine more than a typical business might even. I mean, I the amount of data that you're using, the amount of intentionality when it comes to your people you're serving and your donors. I mean, this isn't like just like a rip it out, top of the hat, like what do we have, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
And so the reason I bring this up for our listeners is for our listeners to be really careful and not dismissing is not the right word, but just being like, oh, that's a nonprofit that doesn't apply to me.
Right.
Because we have people who listen who they're in the nonprofit world, but this whole concept of like customer engagement, donor stewardship.
Yeah, same thing.
It feels like a lot of times what happens in business is like we go from customer to customer to customer. So it's like, okay, I got that customer, great.
Yep.
And they're at least happy enough, right? And then I go on to the next one, and I go on to the next one. And it's very much this numbers game. And it makes sense because like we're all trying to pay bills and it's fine.
You got to make money.
But this concept that you're talking about of like almost like hitting the pause button and like really drilling in on what does that customer want? What do they care about? This seems really obvious, and yet not a lot of people are doing it.
Well, I think part of the reason is short-term versus long-term payoff. And that has been a big thing that has emerged for me and our organization and many board discussions even about in the short term, I think COVID impacted everyone from a financial standpoint. And it also kind of showed you where maybe some of your weaknesses are. So I think it's really easy to go, ooh, there's not a lot of short-term gain out of some of these exercises or activities or policies and procedures or processes, or, for us, we would call it our development plan. And we totally revamped our development plan as part of that next strategic plan. Well, that would be the same thing for you maybe as your revenue plan. Okay, how are we going to generate income over the next 1 to 3 years? Yeah.
Right.
But you have to look long-term. And that's something that I've really had to talk about a lot with our team is financially short-term, we've definitely got some things to overcome because revenue's down from not being able to have in-person events. Revenue's down by having to maybe pay more staff versus utilize more volunteers. Different reasons that revenue was impacted the last 20 months or 22 months now, wherever we are now. I can't even keep up. But anyway, and then also while you're in a big capital campaign, so maybe same thing with a for-profit, you're building some new office building or some new customer service department that you're, putting together for long-term payoff. And I think that's the key is it's scary to think about, okay, we just got to bide our time. We're building the future. But sometimes when you're building the future, there's not going to be a whole lot of huge gains and wins.
Sure.
And you have to be okay with that. And I think that you have to exercise a lot of patience. And I think you have to really, really have a good plan and work the plan, get the right people that can work the plan. And then for us, having a board of directors that has been very respectful, encouraging, and supportive of, I want to say sort of my vision, again, with their support and blessing and everything else, of course, approvals. But I think everyone's okay to say we're in this for the long haul. This is a long-term, kind of plan that we're working towards. And so the next 3 years, we really want to take a big look at, what are the long-term big revenue streams so that we can set ourselves up for success for years and years and years and years to come to carry out our mission, which was, our whole reason for existing.
Right.
So
does it feel like people, like this ability to see long-term, think long-term, strategize beyond like 30 days from now, but like actually, 3 years can be an eternity.
Especially what we just saw happen in a few months.
Yeah. So like in a moment, things can really shift and change. Yeah. Is this something that, do you feel like leaders today can develop this, like train it, or is it more something that some people just have versus, that person just can't see long term?
I think it can be both because I have seen people on my own team who have been here now for a long enough period of time that I think it's about buying into it maybe a little bit and then being able to have some trust in a process. So I think it's almost exercising that muscle of being patient, slowing down, and coming up with a plan, and then kind of taking it like sometimes I'm down to day by day. Like yesterday, I was like, oh, we only have $299,000 left to raise in this capital campaign's done. Today, I'm like, oh gosh, okay. But you have to go back. So I go back to the plan, which is like basically a prospect list, and we need these many people at these dollar amounts, just like you would. Like I need this many new clients at this dollar amount over this period of time, whatever, same thing. Yeah. So I go back to the plan, I go back to the strategy, and I'm like, oh, okay, we're good, we got it. So I think part of the way that you can kind of train that muscle, or you can teach yourself if you're not naturally kind of a visionary, patient, kind of a long-term thinker, I think you can, to a degree, train yourself to be, or at least be more comfortable sitting with that if you have a good plan that you can go back to. And if you have enough flexibility to say, okay, we've revised our capital campaign plan, for example. We launched it, like I said, December 2019. And now it's almost, about 2 years in. And we have revamped that, I don't know, maybe 3 to 4 times to say, okay, we got to change direction. Or, okay, that, large grant that we were kind of counting on didn't come through. So now where will we make up that revenue, right? Hey, that investor or that advertiser that I thought I was going to get ended up deciding to do something else. So now I got to figure out we're going to make that up. So you have to be okay with that. You have to sit with it. I think you have to be enough on top of your plan that you know the plan to go back and go, yeah, okay, that wasn't going to work. And I think what I see a lot of nonprofits do is they create the plan, they get excited, maybe they hire a consultant or someone to help them create it, and then they never look at it again or never think about it again.
Right, it goes on the shelf.
Yeah. Yeah. So not only could that cause bigger issues like mission creep and whatever, but even just your day-to-day priorities, when you start getting really like bogged down, like, oh my gosh, we're never going to accomplish this goal, or we're never going to get this project finished or whatever, not going back and revisiting that plan, I think is a huge mistake that a lot of people make. Because you kind of forget, like, oh yeah, we did make a plan, and it was a pretty good plan,
Yeah, and it's almost like, we get so wound up or excited around, I'm doing like my business plan, or like, what's my goals for 2022. And so it's like, shiny object syndrome. It's like, ooh, yeah, and I want to do that. And oh yeah, of course I got to do that. And, so now your plan has like 50 elements to it, which no one's going to have the energy or time to deal with. But you make a good point that a lot of times it does just go on a shelf, and it's not like an active, an active breathing element of your business.
Yeah.
Because we did just go through COVID, which was a massive...
Nobody could plan for that.
Exactly, right. And so like the need to pivot and be agile, which I'm curious for you guys, your nonprofits by definition have a multitude of volunteers who help the business operate. Going through COVID, one of the things that I saw were businesses that not only did they need to pivot or need to be agile, were unwilling to. So like a really great example of this would be like a business that does only in-person services with someone, and now they can't do that. And so it's like, okay, what's the next answer? And one business, for example, was like, well, we can't change what we do. That's literally what we do. So we're just going to kind of hold out and wait for this thing to blow over. Well, you made the joke, we're like 22 months or I don't know. Yeah, we're almost at 2 years of this thing. That business is long dead.
That's right.
I mean, they made it maybe 6 months, ran out of cash, and they're done.
Yep.
And so, and that's not to, I feel bad for them.
Sure.
I'm not trying to be condescending, but it's like, it feels like there is this natural constant pressure to, I need to be agile. I need to revise the plan. I need to look at it again. And for whatever reason, I don't know if you have an insight on this, just it seems like not only do sometimes people shelve it, but other times like the plan isn't working, but that's the plan we decided.
Yeah.
So we're just going to stick to it even though it's not really working, I guess.
And you know what? That might be a culture issue.
Yeah.
And it might be a values issue. So if you have, like for us, I really go back to, we do it actually all the time. Like it's an inside joke in our office about, thank God flexibility is one of our, core values. And we determined that before COVID ever happened. And so we were like, because what happens is when you have those values, it becomes part of your culture and vice versa. It really goes hand in hand to me. But anyway, so I think that part of our culture at Ronald McDonald House Charities of Arkoma is very much based on, you may walk in and your whole day gets derailed because you had an issue with a family and the police were called at 2 a.m. for a domestic issue, or maybe later on in the day you just found out that a family that's been staying with you for 60 days lost their child and now everybody's in shambles. And then the next day you may have a donor call and say, what's up with this? What's going on? Or you sent me a thank you letter and it had someone else's name on it. Or, you know what I mean? Like things, just like in your business, things happen that you don't plan for on a day-to-day basis. And all of those things to me are a big deal. And they should be treated that way. So our culture is very much, you have to walk in with a plan, knowing that entire plan might get derailed. I mean, and you know this story because I told you before we started recording, but just yesterday I was driving down the interstate and had a rock completely shatter out a back window, and it's 38 degrees outside and I'm going 78 miles an hour down the road. So now I'm in a wind tunnel in my car. So I had to spend half my morning the next day with meetings all already scheduled and jammed in, going to get my window fixed. So I think it's just common sense that you have to be flexible even though you have a plan. And I think the other part of it is that sometimes people are afraid maybe they're flexible and patient, but they're afraid other people won't be.
Sure.
So it's like, well, no, we can't do that because our customers are all gonna, and it's like, okay, well, train them, make that part of your culture even extended, right? That we're flexible with you and we ask that you be flexible back with us too. And I think if you didn't learn that in COVID, might be some good podcasts to listen to. Because I feel like if it taught the world nothing, it was grace and flexibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's interesting hearing you talk about y'all's values for two reasons. One, I think it's great that you guys have values that isn't just adopted from like your national brand.
Yeah.
Which I think a lot of people kind of fall into that trap. And then 2, I remember before you guys had values. I remember you guys creating your values. And so for me, it's really cool just hearing you talk about something like such a natural element of how you do business, knowing you guys prior to that.
Yeah.
And you guys were in shambles. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right.
You guys were great.
Were wrecked.
No, y'all are great. But it does make me think about, you have this value of flexibility. It's a integral part of how you do business on a day-to-day basis.
Every day. Mm-hmm.
And, we're hope to God on the tail end of COVID, who knows, but you guys, separate from just the value of flexibility, you've also been someone you have put a lot of attention to culture. And I say a lot of attention, I mean, like my impression of you is that it's a daily conversation.
Literally.
I mean, that it comes up as like a key strategy point every week.
It's true.
And what I have seen during COVID is businesses now that are like, hey, we have a very toxic work environment.
Yes.
Like, what's the overnight plan to create culture? Or like, we need a great culture. Like, can we do it in 2 weeks?
Yep.
And I know for you, this has been a journey for 3-4 years. I mean, a long time.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit more
longer.
about like because I think for you, it's sometimes people see, your leadership and your team, and it's great and it's fun. And you guys are accomplishing so much, and they don't see the journey that you've been through. So I don't know if you can share a little bit more about like the grueling process of just.
Well, there's a lot of things that come to mind, and that could be like a whole nother podcast. But I'll
Round
tell
3.
you, right, where it's already in the book. See, so I would say one of the biggest parts, and you and I have talked about this previously too, that people make your culture. And culture make your people. I think you could kind of look at it, to me, your time out. But I think having the right people and giving the people the resources that they need, which includes everything from the actual like computer that they need or the flexibility to work from home. We had an employee, for example, when we were doing more working from home on a regular basis, who just where she lives out in the country can't get great internet. So we were like, okay, well, we'll get you the Wi-Fi hotspot that we use for events and things. We'll kick it up and you can take the Wi-Fi hotspot home when you need to use it, So again, it's the actual tools and resources that they need, but it's also the resources that they need to be able to adhere to and understand your culture, to be able to buy in with what the goals are and what you're trying to do. So we didn't just go, hey, we're going to make this strategic plan. We're going to set these core values. We're going to print them out nice and pretty and frame them and put them on a wall. And how many businesses have you walked in where you see that and then you have a bad experience, or your friend does or something, and you're like sitting here going, God, it's so disappointing. You did the work to create this, the values and the mission statement and the vision statement, print it up on your wall and do all of that. But it's obviously not being practiced or executed. And I think that comes down to the people from the top to the bottom, everybody. And I think it's giving them the tools and the resources to be able to engage and buy in and develop and be a part of the culture and the values. And if you don't, like I said, in addition to just the tools and resources to do their job, it's the tools and the resources to be able to buy into the culture. And I think that a lot of businesses and nonprofits, that their worlds were rocked by COVID. So say, for example, that everybody was in a big office together and now they're not. That's hard. And how do you figure out how to keep a culture of good communication? Or, just getting to know each other and building trust by seeing each other every day and going through experiences together. I think that's hard. So I think a big key for us was having the right people. And, part of having the right people, and you and I've talked about this, so I'm just going to say it, but it's being able to let people go. And it's being able to, on the front end, when you're hiring people, like, for example, right now we're having a really hard time hiring, just like everyone else. And we've never, ever, ever, ever had a hard time hiring, by the way. But we're having a hard time with it. But what's funny is our team has gotten lots of resumes. They've interviewed lots of people. Some days, they're like, well, we're just not getting a lot of people apply. And then the next day they're like, well, I had 10 interviews yesterday. I didn't hire anybody. Yeah. Because even though we're having trouble hiring, we're flexible enough that we figured out how to operate our organization without some of those frontline team members that we really need, but we won't settle. So we're waiting until we find the right people, because even when we're desperate for them, we know how important the right people are to the right culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a friend of mine was joking about how she made a bet. She's like a leadership person, but they had 2 positions open in one of her customers' business, and she made a bet with the CEO on basically waiting versus hiring the first available.
Yeah.
And the CEO was like, we just got to get someone in this seat.
Yeah.
We got to fill the seat.
Warm body.
And she was like, well, no, let's be a bit more. And so their bet is she's taking one of the positions to hire for, and he's taking the other one.
Smart.
And they're going to see how it pans out.
Yeah.
But
well, that's a good idea.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because you're right. It's like we're all going through this really sort of panicked time of, finding good workers, finding the right people.
Yeah.
There's some real momentum around the Great Resignation.
Yes.
And I mean, I just personally, I have so much content that just keeps getting created around this.
Wow.
And it does make people wonder, how do I find that great employee and yet still be quick about it, I guess?
Yeah.
Like the balance of that?
Yeah.
In the sense of obviously great employees, they have plenty of offers. They're finding their home. Mm-hmm. But, going back to something you mentioned a second ago, rethinking how business is done. Like, for example, if like culture has always happened in the office and now people can't be in the office, it feels like sometimes people are hesitant. I mean, going back to the concept of agility, there's all sorts of technology out there of, Zoom, Slack, whatever. But business owners who are unwilling to see, I guess, to re-envision their business another way, where it's like, okay, no one's in the office. I guess we just want to have culture happen. But instead thinking of it as, how do we do it as opposed to it just can't happen.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
For you guys, I mean, what are some of the other ways you've had to pivot in terms of, are things back to normal now for you guys, or is it still kind of?
I would say no, mostly because of just we're not fully staffed, and this is the longest we've ever not been fully staffed, and now we're trying to staff a new 11-bedroom Ronald McDonald house,
right?
And we staff 24/7, 365.
Right.
And I don't know how many overnight staff you've ever tried to hire. That is a hard position to hire for.
Sure.
And then also, to be totally transparent, one of the things that we're seeing is, so minimum wage is still what it is.
Yeah.
But minimum wage, in quotes, what it has become, because people are having such a hard time hiring new employees, everyone's raising, there's a local hospital. Well, it's not local. There's a big hospital that recently said none of our employees, no matter what level, will make less than $15 an hour.
Okay.
Well, I can't compete with that. We're still above minimum wage. Mm-hmm. And we have budgeted for, it's not that far off from that, but it's enough far off from that. Local restaurants, quick food service restaurants and things, their minimum is $13, $14 an hour. Mm-hmm. Which is well above minimum wage. And I'm not saying I have any issues with paying people. I wish we could pay everybody who works here $1 million a year. Yeah, but sure. I can't because I don't have that much money. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But I feel like they deserve it. I feel like they work that hard. I feel like the service that we provide is worth that. Mm-hmm. But it's also reality of you don't have $1 million to pay everybody a year, right? Mm-hmm. So anyway, I think that one of the challenges that we're still having is how do we compete with that? Well, the way we compete with that, and this is how our team feels strongly, and that's why it takes the right people, is with our culture. We're flexible. Sure. You can work here and take care of your family, but also be a part of your family. Mm-hmm. We're not, on your time away, we're not bugging you. If you need time off to take your child to the doctor, by all means, take your child to the doctor. Mm-hmm. If you need time off because you've got to move into your new apartment tomorrow, and if you don't go by and get that check dropped off and get those keys today, and they just called you an hour ago to tell you that, but you're going to lose your apartment if you don't, please go take care of your apartment. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So again, having flexibility to go, this is life. Mm-hmm. And for us, like I said, we operate 24/7, 365 with live, awake staff at our programs. So we also realize we're always working. So do what you need to do.
Right.
Take care of your life and your family. And family is also obviously one of our, core values. And so we feel like for us to be able to live that value out with the people we serve, we have to let our employees take care of their own families first.
Right.
And I think that is one of the number one key defining factors in our organization, because if you work here, you know that you can still take care of your family, financially, but also take care of your family from the flexibility of being able to take care of your family. You're running late because maybe your kid just had a rough morning. Several of us, including myself, have those stories where you're like, hey, I'm so sorry I'm running late.
Everything's
because,
falling apart.
We put on jeans instead of, athletic pants. And by the time we pulled up to school, it was a crisis, and we had to run home and change pants so that the child could go to school without screaming and crying, And so knowing that that's just life and it happens. And nobody here abuses that flexibility, and nobody here abuses that that's part of our culture. And I know it's because we have the right people here, right? Who understand that and want to live that out. And so we always say, we may not be the most competitive, and we're competitive with our pay. But we may not be the most competitive with our pay or the highest pay, but we have a lot more to add and a lot more value, not just the warm fuzzy of our mission, but like actual life practical things that I think are hard to compete with.
And I like that last detail you added of, I think a lot of times I think sometimes business owners are living on another planet where they're like, I can't pay as high as maybe one of my competitors. And then in their mind, it's culture, but it's really just like random perks. We have a ping pong table. And it's like, okay, you have the one person on your team who actually plays ping pong.
And when are they really going to get up from their desk and go do that?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Right. And so like these really weird, strange, random perks that, and then at the end of the day, though, you're still micromanaged. You still hate your job. You're still, I think many of us, I know the feeling of calling out on a sick day and then, your stomach's in knots because your phone's being called off the hook. 100%. People can't find something. You're being guilted. Are you sure you can't come in? A friend of mine, she actually quit her job because she had a sick day. It was her first sick day in 6 years.
Wow.
And her boss asked her that morning, did you plan to be sick today?
Oh, my
And just guilted her. And she was like, why am I doing this? But point being, you're talking about something meaningful and tangible, and Harvard Business Review has talked about this extensively of how people will leave a job for less money if it is that kind of environment that gives them dignity, gives them, personal freedom, and isn't like, I guess perk driven.
Jail.
Yeah.
Or perk driven. Okay, that too.
Yours was much better, actually. I should have gone with that.
Well, and we even do that here. Leah, and I know obviously Leah, but she's our COO, and she's been here now over 9 years, and I've been here almost 12. So Leah and I've been here together for a long time, holding down the fort, if you will, and we've grown and learned a lot together too. But every now and then I'll have that same guilt of like, okay, Colin, that's my oldest son, has some different developmental things and some stuff that, takes a little bit more of my attention maybe. And so every now and then it's like, Colin's having a really rough day. I just need to be with him today, or I got to go pick him up early, or whatever it might be. But, you feel guilty because I've got all these things to do, and tomorrow we've got that big meeting and I'm not quite done with the agenda or whatever. And our team is very quick to be like, I'll do it. I got it. Like, turn off your cell phone and take care of your child. And you know what we always say to each other, because we all do that every now and then, like, I can't do this today. I've got so much. And we all do that of like, I'll come to your house and pick up your computer. I'll drop this thing off for you if you need to like go through this checklist. And I think it's because we embrace that part of our environment so fiercely that we protect it for everyone. And I want to say that I think part of all of this boils down to a culture that has a lot to do with fear. So we're afraid to pivot. What's going to happen? We're afraid to allow our employees to have flexible work environments. We're afraid
what if,
to...
and or we have one bad example of that one employee who took advantage of you and now for forever. Yeah.
Or on the opposite side, you're afraid as an employee to take that time, even if it's for the most important thing in your life, which is your family, or yourself, too. But anyway, and so I think people are afraid even, well, what are they going to think of me if I'm not there today? Are they going to think that I planned my sick day? And you know what? Maybe you did. It's called mental health. But for real. That's another thing that I hope people got out of COVID is how important and fragile mental health is for people. I think that's been a huge thing that people are waking up to, which praise the Lord. But my point is that I think sometimes it's just simply driven by fear. And I think if people can kind of jump off the cliff and just do it, and they have the right people, they have the right plans, processes, procedures, budgets, all those things in place, you can allow for taking the risk, if that's what it is for you, of allowing this type of work and environment to go on.
Yeah, it almost feels like
courage.
It is, and it almost feels like, as a business owner, a lot of times like we get so focused on like that feeling of stability, and so then to be in that zone of this is very chaotic, it's very different. Yeah,
it's not doesn't feel safe.
Yeah, exactly. Am I even making the right decision? But it does seem like it's better than the alternative of which is summed up basically as that's just how we've always done it.
That's it.
Right. And
and that's how we've always done it is a little bit, to me, fear driven too, because that means we're afraid to find out what it would be like if we do it different. And I think that part of what, if I can be a little bit ethereal, I would say that the culture in the world is very much based on fear. And I get it. I mean, it's a freaking pandemic. Like, of course, there's a lot of fear and you feel that. And I think that has almost, for some of these businesses, like you said, that were afraid to pivot, maybe they aren't necessarily afraid, but the culture of the world is so based on fear, right? That it's like, it almost influences you and can overshadow some of your decision making. So I think holding true to the facts and what's real versus getting caught up in being so afraid of everything is what leaders need to be doing, and have the courage, like you said, to be agile, to change, to embrace, okay, this is really different. It feels really scary. It doesn't feel safe. It doesn't feel comfortable, but it's the right thing to do for long-term success of the organization and the people that work here. And that's why we're here. So doing that is huge.
Has like the trust factor always been something that has just been natural for you? Because I think that's a big part of it too, is like I envision, because I think some business owners who heard what you just said are like salivating at the mouth of like the employee who's like, driving to pick up the lap. Like, wow, that sounds really great. Like, where do I find those people? But on the same token, it's the same boss who is very parental. And I heard a guy the other day who was like, my employees are like kids. You listen to them, but you don't actually do what they want you to do. And I was that's pretty scary that's your philosophy of leadership, is that your employees are children, right? Yeah. And so you obviously have this very much abundant trust for your team. Is that something that's natural to you, like your personality, or?
There could be an element to that. So in Strength Finders and every personality thing ever, I'm always off the charts positive. So I don't know if it's so much trust as optimism, glasses half full, and I choose that. I choose to say, okay, I have empowered this person. I have trained them. They know what their budget is. They know what their performance metrics are. They know what their job is. They helped create the strategic plan. Like, the list goes on. They know what the expectations are, in and out, all day long, every day. And if they don't know, or if they have a question, we always say, ask away. Even if you feel like, I can't believe it's like embarrassing that I forgot this thing, or, I can't believe I'm even asking this, or it might make me look bad if I'm asking this. We're like, just ask it. And if it does make you look bad, then we're going to be like, ooh, yeah, okay, that's kind of embarrassing. You should know that.
Don't ask that again.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to tell you this time, but don't ask it again. Learn it.
Sure.
Anyway, so I think that it's the confidence in knowing that people have all of those tools, and the confidence in knowing if somebody messes up, there's things you can do. Or if they mess up to a degree where you've done all the things you can do to help coach or help, redirect or whatever it may be that they need, depending on the circumstance, having the confidence that it's okay to part ways with people too. And I think that's really hard in leadership. And that, honestly, you kind of talked about earlier things, some of the grueling parts. And I alluded to having the right people and not being afraid to part ways with people. And I really had to learn that. And so I think the key there, again, I think a lot of it goes back to courage. And I think a lot of it goes back to putting the organization and the plan of the organization first, and saying, you know what, sometimes it's not even about that person, it's about the organization. And this person may be a great, talented, wonderful person, but they don't fit with this organization, and that is okay.
Right.
And I think that's a hard thing, though, as a leader, because there's such a personal, emotional element, which is also okay. But I think there's positive, for me, there's trust, confidence, positivity, whatever you want to call it, in the fact that it's okay to part ways with people if it's the right thing for the organization.
That sort of relentless optimism that you have,
that helps,
or resilient
a lot,
optimism. How do you, I guess, hold fast to that? Like when an employee burns you, like when it wasn't a good fit, or employee, you mentioned how like your team would never abuse the sort of the common understanding you have.
They don't current abuse. Not that they would never, they don't.
Yeah. But, let's say you do have that one employee who just, is it not in a malicious way, but just made a bad decision and it affected you personally negatively, affected the business negatively in a meaningful way beyond just like an inconvenience.
Yeah.
Is it hard to still maintain that optimism, or like what's your typical response to that? Because a lot of times leaders, like I mentioned earlier, like that's the data point that frames like a whole new set of procedures, whole new set of policies, for better or worse. And I've even heard it described as like one boss who was very careful on customer data because one of our employees had taken that customer data and basically had quit the business and taken a bunch of customers with him. And so now she kept a lot of that customer data close to the chest because she was fearful of like, what if that happens again? But the irony now is the business isn't running very effectively because her salespeople like only have a certain amount of actual information. So how do you respond when an employee makes those kinds of bad decisions that affect you in a negative way?
So I think that what people have to build is I'm thinking of like 3 or 4 things. So I'm going to try and succinctly answer this.
Yeah, I'm really bad at asking like really long-winded questions.
Well, and I'm really bad at being long-winded. So
it's like, here's the 4-minute question. So
so I think first of all, we're all human, and I think it's okay to feel all of that. And I'm not saying that I don't, or that I, because I'm so positive, I just never feel negative about it, because I do. And sometimes it can take a pretty big toll on me, just like everyone else. That's why I kind of talked about being okay with like, you know what, maybe today I just need a day because of mental health or whatever I'm dealing with. But I think having people around you, and you're one of those people for me, as you know, that you can, and we have another mutual friend that's in leadership, and she and I really see eye to eye on a lot, and it's somebody I can reach out to. And it's the people you can kind of vent to too, and be like really honest, here's how I really feel. And you can kind of share the personal side of it that, from an HR standpoint, you have to leave at the door, right? But from your mentor, friend, group. So I think building that group of people, because it can be really lonely to be in a leadership position. I don't have a peer at my organization that I can go to and go, hey, I just need to vent for a minute. Can you just listen? Because I need somebody else who understands the exact, they work with this person
context.
too. Yeah. Right. And so I think building the group of people that you have that it's safe to do that with is huge key. Because sometimes you just need to kind of vent and let that part go. The personal, this impacted me personally or emotionally, it just ticked me off. I have poured my heart and soul to help mentor or grow this person, and they went and did this. If it's that type scenario, then it's okay. Like, get it out. In fact, get it out in a safe place first, right? Before you go and say it to the person. And then I think a second part that came to mind when you were asking that, this is the part where I would say it's like your kids, but it's choosing your battles. So what really is worth it? Like if I ever hear that after a meeting, an employee, maybe they didn't make like a detrimental comment to my character or the decision that I made, but they made it known that they didn't like it or they didn't agree with it. If it's like, they didn't like that, I'm going to shut the office down for an extra day Thanksgiving week to give everyone an extra day, but maybe they can't take that off because they have a meeting. Okay, be mad at me. Like, I'm sorry. Sure. The deal was if you don't have anything or if you can move things on your calendar and have that extra day, please do. But if you can, I'm sorry. Take it some other time. So things like that where maybe you have to have a thicker skin and go, okay, yeah, all right. So I think choosing your battles is huge, and deciding what's important enough to either let yourself get personally invested with. And I think some of that's just like experience and time and maturity. I'm going to say it, but I know it's not about age. because I know people, years older than me that would be very offended by a comment like that.
Sure.
Well, who said that? And why'd they say it? And go in there and get all hot and bothered about it when it's like, okay, well, of course that rubbed them the wrong way, but like, okay, which that didn't really happen. I totally made that up, just so you know.
Yeah.
I did close down the office for Thanksgiving to give people a break, though. I did do that. And then another thing that kind of, comes to mind is having a culture, and this is something that we really worked with you on too, because I felt like, we did 5 dysfunctions of a team. So we learned about trust. We learned about vulnerability. We learned about so many things. We, learned about customer service. We learned about attention to detail. Over the years, we've done all of these different exercises with our team that have been really good. But the biggest component that was still missing, and when I talk to other people in my position with other nonprofits and Ronald McDonald House chapters, it's the candidness is still one of the biggest barriers to reaching that ultimate success.
I agree.
To the point where I have had an employee with kind of a business association that we kind of have a partnership with. Somebody really rubbed her the wrong way, and she wasn't wrong. They really were disrespectful to her. So she was so proud of herself. She comes into my office and she's like, so I practiced candor because, that's what we do here. And I was so proud of her. And she was not she was a candid person before, but not a controlled candid person. And she'd tell you this. And so she learned how to do it the right way.
Yeah.
Right?
Poise.
She was kind of the blow off the handle, fly off the handle type.
Yeah.
And so she learned how to do it in a professional way that's constructive versus just, I cannot believe you just did that. And I'm so ticked off right now way. Okay. So she was so proud of herself that she practiced candor with this other person because that's a huge thing for our organization. Well, she learned quickly that this other person had not ever had any kind of candor training. And it just blew her mind because it's such a part of what we do that it's hard for us to understand that other people don't do that. So I think that's a component too, though, is being able to be candid, but also understand. And, we've talked about this before too, is being able to say, hey, can I be candid with you? Which is being candid and can be also hard because the person might say, no, you cannot be candid with me.
Yeah, I can't even right now.
We have the culture that says, right now I can't do that, but I can, let's try to talk tomorrow. Let me take some breaths and let's talk tomorrow.
Sure.
But with outside people who've never been through that, they feel like you're being aggressive and coming at them,
Well, and their only experience may be like a drama-filled,
bad,
gossiping kind of work environment where you don't have this kind of conversations.
So we've really had to kind of learn that as an organization, like I said, to the point where I had this employee that was like, well, I'm going to always be candid. Why would I not? This is so great. And, just recently we were opening the house and Leah that I alluded to earlier, she won't mind if I tell this story, but she had a couple of her direct reports and myself, and we were all looking at this thing. It was really stressful. We were trying to open the new house and we were needing to make a decision about something being installed permanently to the walls, which, that's a big decision when you just paid $3.5 million for a house. And so they were asking my opinion, and Lee and I did not agree. And to the point where I had to look at her, and my face was getting red and hot, and I had to look at her and I said, I don't agree, but I also am not the person who needs to make this final decision. So I'm going to walk away and I'm going to let you guys make that decision. So one of her direct reports immediately said, okay, I got it. I'll make the decision. Good. And I walked away and went and cooled off. There was just a lot of stress. It was one of those where it wasn't a big deal, but in the moment I was just like, and everything was fine. And later on I went to Leah and I said, hey, I was really proud of this. I'll say her name. She doesn't care. I was so proud of Jessica because you and I were kind of having a little bit of a tense moment, and we have taught such a good culture here that she recognized that and knew that it was appropriate for her to go, hey, cool, I got it. I'll make the decision. We're good. And everything was good. And we also have the culture to where nobody was standing there like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
They're like, our bosses are in a fight.
Yeah.
But instead it was like, okay, it's a little tense. We all get it. We are all feeling the tension. So somebody else can rise up into that leadership position and do that. And I was okay letting them do that too. And so was she. So I think that's a grueling thing to get to, because you have to have trust of like, because I could have snapped at her and been like, well, who are you talking to me like that? But instead I was like, okay, thank you. Please make that decision. So I think that there's just so many pieces of that get to where you can have the trust and the confidence and the positive attitude about things, but nothing good ever comes. What's the phrase? Like, it has to hurt to get to, childbirth hurts, but by golly, what you get at the end.
So my wife tells me.
Yeah, right. Spending a big down payment on a new mortgage hurts.
Yeah, it's the pain in the process.
But how cool, because you are now a homeowner and you put 20% down on your house, whatever it might be. But none of it is necessarily easy or doesn't hurt. And I think it's another thing I was talking about earlier, kind of working those muscles that aren't really muscles. But I think it's, almost as a leader going, God, I really don't want to do this. This really sucks. But I need to do it. I am going to own the position that I'm in. And then you do it and it had this great outcome, even though it hurt. And you're like, okay, it's kind of like, I can have another baby now.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, I did that. It sucked. I did it. I can do it again. So I think that it's really about having the courage to kind of jump off the cliff and know you'll be okay because you already did all the work to be okay.
I love that you mentioned candidness too, because it does feel like the more I'm talking with teams and working with businesses, like candidness keeps cropping up as like the end all be all, like this is the most important thing. And it almost seems to tie everything else together. Like you want an engaged team, you want a team that holds themselves accountable, like rather than it being this very much like top down, just be a better boss, like developing this culture of we're honest, we're transparent, and we tell each other what's happening. It seems like that's really moving the needle more than anything else. So, Stephanie, we are out of time. This has been a great conversation. What is next in 2020? I guess this episode is going to be live probably early 2022. We're recording right now. It's December of 2021. And as you all are listening to this, COVID is totally gone and life is great again. So we hope. But so this is going to be live early 2022. So what can people expect to be happening with Ronald McDonald House Charities here in Northwest Arkansas over this next year?
So like I mentioned, our next 3-year strategic plan was just adopted by our board, goes into effect January 1. That is a living, breathing document. But the kind of theme with that is sustainability and really taking a deep dive into what can we do next in terms of increasing revenue and really being, we're pretty darn efficient, but there's always things we can do better. And so it's really taking a good deep dive into like internal infrastructure, our revenue plans and streams. We're launching a few new revenue goals and projects. And so really we're hoping to just kind of be under the radar. We can now serve 25 families a night, plus the patients on our Ronald McDonald Care Mobile. So taking care of those families to the absolute best that we can, raising more money, taking care of our donors, and just really taking care of each other in the organization, because that is how we're going to be successful long term.
Well, I'm a huge fan. And for people who are listening who maybe they want to donate either their time or their money, what's the best location for them to do that? How do they do that? So
they can call our office in Springdale, which is the main office, so they can kind of get onto any location, 479-756-5600. We're doing a little PSA now. Yeah. Thanks for the free advertising. Sure. Or they can go to our website at rmhcofarkoma.org. Great. And I will put those, the number and the link down in the episode description. Stephanie, it's been so great having you on the show today. I appreciate it. I'm so glad you came on for a second time. Yeah, well, me too. We will do a third one at some point. Okay, thank you. Hey, for our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, what the heck are you waiting on? Click that subscribe button, click the follow button so you can keep getting good advice wherever you are. Don't also forget that if you want to support the podcast, you can be one of our amazing Patreons. Go to patreon.com/goodadvice. Again, that's patreon.com/goodadvice. For as little as the cost of a cup of coffee, you can support this amazing, great podcast. And for those of you who are supporting the podcast, we appreciate it. We thank you. And that is today's good advice. We'll catch you later. See ya.